Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators and their journey. And today we have with us Rene of She Became Visible. And co-hosting with me is Lila Tuller. Thanks, Rene, for coming on our show.
Thank you. And co-hosting with me is Lila Tuller on She Became Visible. So this worked out really well. Lila is my co-host as well. So that worked out really well.
Yeah. So about how many episodes has Lila appeared on about?
Oh, that's a good question. The person that does my Instagram was always asking me that. What number are you on? I'm like, I don't know. At least
5.
We've been doing this since February, right?
Yeah,
so
you
8 or 9, I think.
Oh
yeah. Yeah, because I left Mormon Discussions in January, and then Lila came on board, and so everything we've done since then, except for every once in a while, I'll jump in and do a little, "Hey guys," blah 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 thing, But yeah, so when we just did one last week, and we got another one coming up, so yeah, we're on about 8 or 9.
People wonder about my show sometimes. I guess it's my show. Maven helped me start it, and she said at the very beginning that she didn't have the bandwidth to be an every day, every time co-host. And then Summer Rain was my first backup. And then there's been a couple other people that have co-hosted. Thanks, Lila, for jumping in on this special occasion.
Couldn't be happier.
And Jean, I really like your introduction because that's what I really wanted to let people know is when I ran into you at Sunstone and you told me what your idea was, I love that your entire goal and mission statement was, I want to help other people get their podcasts out into the world. And I mean, I thought, wow, that is unique and,
that's right.
and unusual.
As my own personal means of taking over the world. That's the ultimate goal.
So you were really trying to start your own little cult. I get it.
So, if you have a goal that's here, it's just too easy, right? If you put a goal up here, you're not going to achieve it, but the journey is fun.
So okay. All right.
Sort of my
all right. All right.
So Rene, tell us a little bit about your background and your life story up until
I broke down and started a podcast.
Before you started a podcast or whatever.
Well, it's funny because Lila and I just did a podcast last week, and we were kind of talking about, I don't even know what we were talking about. What were we talking about, Lila? What was our theme last week?
Caretaking.
Yeah, caregiving. That's right. And I think, and we were talking about how women are kind of, I don't know, maybe it's a natural instinct, who knows, but not, but we're caregivers, right? In fact, Lila and I were talking about how for women, it's hard to secure guests on our podcast because oftentimes I'll have a guest scheduled and they'll call and they'll say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't be there. My son called and asked if I could take care of the kids." Or they'll say, "Oh, my neighbor called and she's really ill. I'm going to take her to the doctor." And it's just this natural instinct to help and to serve. And so women will drop everything to serve their neighbors, their community, their families. And so sometimes getting guests to schedule is kind of difficult. But so we were talking about being caregivers. And so I think Lila and I both married fairly young. We both had large families. And that took up pretty much our whole lives. And we were talking about how, some people will say, well, what drove you out of the church? What made you decide to resign your membership? And I could never really put my finger on it until I started doing a lot of research on caregiving. And I realized, it was patriarchy that drove me out. It wasn't even the CES letter. Yeah. I mean, the historical information backed up my feelings of patriarchy. And all throughout my entire year, my relationships with men in authority in the church, I always chalked up to just, well, that was them. That was a specific man or a specific bishop.
Because the Lord works through imperfect men.
Right. And so it was the patriarchy that drove me to start my podcast, She Became Visible, because I really wanted to encourage women to open their eyes and realize that you have value. You are not necessarily, like my son was severely disabled and he had some fabulous people that surrounded him. And like Lila, you've probably had this too. As a mom, you go to the store, you go to the grocery store and someone will come up to you and say, "Oh, you must be TJ's mom. Oh, you must be the bishop's wife. Oh, you're the mission president's wife. So, oh, you're John Smith's daughter." And so we don't even have a name. It was almost like when Patricia Holland died and it was Elder Holland's wife dies. It's like, she had an effing name, people.
Yeah.
She had, and so this was really my deciding factor was I really want to encourage women to say, I am TJ's mom. My name is Rene, and TJ is one of 6 children. I am his caregiver and his mom and lots of other things. And so really trying to encourage women to stand up and say, it's okay for me to say, well, I am the bishop's wife. Do you know my name? It's Rene. And, you know, so that's kind of where we came from, where we started.
Yeah. And so we'll also get back to like the mechanics of how you started and some other maybe background information of that. But roughly, where did you grow up and what different places did you move to, and how was some of your experiences there?
Well, it's interesting because right now we're in such a highly debated political system, and I'm listening to the new vice presidential nominee for J.D. Vance, and he's talking about his background, and I'm like, hello. I mean, I'm not from Appalachia, but I am from the Midwest. My family is Scottish Irish. They were blue collar workers. Nobody went to college. My uncle worked at Caterpillar. My mom and dad worked. My dad was a used car salesman. My mom worked at Western Electric, putting together telephones, just an industrial assembly line. And they were Methodist and grew up with a belief in Jesus. And then the missionaries came knocking on our door. We were living in a small town south of Chicago. And my mother had an older sister who was a Mormon, but Aunt Marilyn was not a missionary. She never talked about the church. Everybody knew she was a Mormon, but that wasn't her identity. She just came to the family gatherings and she was who she was. But I think because we already had a Mormon in the family, when the missionaries came to the door, my mom let them in. And it's funny because one of the missionaries was Sister Smith, definitely related to Hiram. My mom was all like, oh, because she was related to Hiram Smith, and Sister Collier. And these 2 sisters baptized and converted my parents. Now, my stepfather, I was living with my stepfather and my mother at the time. My parents got divorced when I was 7. And my stepfather was from England. He grew up Church of England. He loved his wine. He loved his Carmen Gia and his things like that. And they both smoked. They both drank. And my dad gave up those things for my mother. And not because he believed in the church, not because he believed Joseph Smith was a prophet, but this is what his family was going to do. So he said, yeah, I guess I'll do it too. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. And so I joined the church. I was 12 when we were baptized in the church. So grew up in Illinois. And then when I was 17, my dad got transferred to the Western Electric in Washington State. And so we moved to Washington State my senior year in high school. And yeah, that was cruel. Plus, I went from a large 1,500, student high school to a 500 student country school where everybody was pre-engaged and the guys were still rolling their cigarettes up in their sleeves, And I was like, what?
Fonz was in your high school.
Yeah. And so my only friends were 3 girls at church in my ward. And that's who I hung out with, was the girls in my ward. They were all 3 bridesmaids at my wedding.
Aww.
And one of them has passed away and the other 2 are still active in the church. I grew up, met my missionary at a church dance. He went on a mission. I went into the Navy. He came home from his mission. We got married in the Salt Lake Temple. Gordon B. Hinckley married us. And we just, my goal was to get pregnant and get out of the Navy because I needed to be a mom and a wife. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. It took me a while to get pregnant. And so after I completed my service, we came back to Oregon and started our family. And we have 6 children. And I was just living the life. But my dissidence came from just odd things. Like I remember thinking, when my son, my youngest son was severely disabled, I had to get up with him many times in the night. And as my kids got older, I thought, you know what? I don't think it's appropriate for me to get up in the night in my garments. And in case one of my teenage boys came out of their bedroom or something like that. So I'm going to start wearing pajamas so that I feel modest when I'm getting up and taking care of my baby. And I thought, and I'm not wearing layers to bed. So I stopped wearing my garments and I just would wear my pajamas. And one day my husband said to me, when you go in for your temple recommend and they ask you, do you wear your garments 24/7? What do you say? And I say yes. And he goes, do you feel good about that? I said, so good. I feel so good about that. But I mean, so I would take things in under my own self-conscious. I knew things that were silly, things that were just radical and fundamental, and things that really made a difference, you know?
Good for
Uh,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I found out about the, and I would have run-ins. Like, here's another example. I also worked a lot in the Young Women's Program, and I had a my maid that had a lot of disabilities. And so the bishop called a couple of Laurels to every Sunday. They would take her and go sit out in the hallway and babysit for her during Young Women's and stuff. And I said, excuse me, why don't you ask an adult woman to do that? Because these girls need to be in Young Women's. And if we're going to do that, would you please call a couple of priests to come and take my son so that I don't have to have him in Young Women's with me? And he was like, no, it was the girls' responsibility to take care of the children. And certainly I'm not going to take boys out of their priests' quorum. And so it's little things like that.
Microaggressions.
Yeah. And patriarchy. There's like, I know better than you. I'm going to issue a calling. I remember getting a calling after I had my 5th baby. He was just a few weeks old. They called me to be in the Young Women's. And I remember driving to the beach in Oregon. I've got this brand new baby. I'm picking up these little beehives at their homes to take them to the beach for this activity. And their parents are all mowing the yard. Mom's doing chores. And I'm like, why am I taking your kid to the beach? I have 4 other children and a baby in the backseat of my car. We get to the beach. I'm in the car the whole time because this baby cannot be out in the Oregon wind and the, everything that's going on at an Oregon beach. And so I sit in the car the whole time, and I came home and I said, I don't think this is a good calling for me. And they were like, well, the Lord has called you. So, I mean, I could see through that. So when I first heard about Joseph Smith translating the golden plates with a rock and a hat, I was like, oh, this is a bunch of, and then as I studied church history.
Do you remember what year that was that you first heard?
Yeah, that was about 4 years ago.
Okay.
It was right before COVID. And
interestingly, the church bought from the Community of Christ the original printer's manuscript, I think, from them, and also the brown rock, seer stone.
I thought we had that rock.
So I think that was in like 2015 or 2016, whenever it was. And the church released, hey, we've got this manuscript and here's a rock. And they thought that's the way the press would go, with like, wow, look at this manuscript. But the press was like, wow, look at the rock, the magic rock that Joseph Smith used to translate it was more interesting than the manuscript. And so I didn't know about it then. Just like you, during COVID was when I was first.
Yeah.
Sort of. The only other tinge of that is in 2010 or 11, I heard a rerun of South Park where they do Meet the Mormons or whatever the show's called. And so the story is told pretty good. It's like that seems close, even though they make humorous things in there. But what they really got wrong was that Joseph Smith looked in a hat at a rock to translate the. That's the only thing I had an issue with. Everything else was like, yeah, it kind of happened that way, and you kind of told it funny. But where did you get that idea?
Yeah.
Joseph Smith had a quill pen, and he had the golden plates open, and he would look, and he could tell from the characters what should be written down. Now, I didn't realize that painting of Joseph with the quill pen always, right?
Yeah.
Didn't make sense because he always had
a scribe. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As far as we know.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's ever identified any writing.
What he was, just his version of the first vision, I think, is one of the few things. Yeah.
And so anyway, yes, 2020.
Well, yeah. And I think, and that just led me down the rabbit hole. But I think also one of the things that motivated me was when I decided to let my hair go gray, I started following other women on social media that had also gone gray. And the comments that they would get from complete strangers would come up to them and say, you'd look 10 years younger if you dye your hair. Or if they went out with family, they would say, "Oh, this must be your mother," when it was her husband, or her.
If
or
I
her,
was in your shoes, I would have said, "Gee, your IQ would seem 10 points higher if you hadn't made that statement."
That's all right. I'm going to write that one down. That's a really good response. But I was appalled because I thought nobody has gone up to Anderson Cooper and said, Anderson, you're a journalist.
No.
You should really dye your hair. Or George Clooney, George, you'd look 10 years younger if you dyed your hair. And so that was another motivation for it's like, oh my gosh, women, because then they would get on social media and they would say, I don't know what to do. Should I dye my hair? I feel really bad. I'm like, do you know this person? A complete stranger. Did you say, you'd look 10 years younger if you'd lose 20 pounds, fatso?
Yeah.
You'd never say that to somebody, but they just feel.
I would.
Okay. Gene, this is why you don't have any friends. No, not really.
When I was a patriarchal prick, we'll say.
Oh my gosh. But I mean, these are the things. As I reached my 60s, I love, Lila, you'll testify to this. I see it in my daughters. They're in their mid 40s now. And I see them, they're just like, I'm not putting up with this crap anymore. And when you get to be 60, it's just even more reinforced. And I know there's a hormonal issue because it's like men start crying, women start standing up for themselves. So there's a testosterone estrogen level here that's going on, but I love it because the women are like, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. Here's my problem. And Lila, tell me if you agree. And this is completely anecdotal. I have no data to support this, but the problem I think I have with our podcast reaching the people that we're trying to reach is boomers, women that are 60 and above they haven't been culturally taught to stand up for themselves. And so it's really hard for them to say, well, I agree with what you say, but I could never do that. My children, if I left the church, if I resigned my membership, or if I didn't dye my hair, my husband doesn't like it. And I don't want my kids to think I'm not doing this. And I don't want my grandkids to, they always have these other people's opinions that stop them from doing. Like I watched a podcast with Dr. Julie Hanks. This lady came on. She said, I've lost over 100 pounds and I've really always wanted to do yoga, but I just don't feel comfortable. I'm like, oh my gosh, who told you can't do yoga? And Dr. Julie said, why aren't you joining a yoga class? I don't understand. But that's the age. That's the boomers have that. And so I think that's why we have a hard time reaching women that are in our demographic to say, it's okay to say, no, I don't want to do that. Or I'm sorry you don't like my hair. Or I'm sorry you don't like my clothing. It's something that I really love and I'm going to do.
Yeah. I mean, Rene, you're the perfect example of the big middle finger to everyone. Not that you would do that, but just that it's like, I'm going to be me.
Yeah.
Not going to worry about what everybody thinks about me anymore. Because I did the same thing. When I got a divorce, my neighborhood was in shock.
Yeah.
They were like, what? The Tuller family? They're perfect. Everything's lovely and perfect about them. What's going on? Is Lila having a nervous breakdown?
Oh, yeah.
Or there must be a scandal. There's probably a scandal.
Yeah.
There was no scandal. It was Lila just finally got to a point where she said, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I have done it too long and I can't do it anymore. So I did that. And then I also left the church. So those two big no-nos where I really, I had a great friend group. We did a lot of things together, but they're all, just really socked into the church. And I think, at first they wanted to pretend like they didn't know, but they did know that I had left and they were talking about it. And so it was this elephant in the room. So one time we were all at lunch for someone's birthday and I just brought it up and I said, I know you all know this. And I said, I just want you to know that I don't care if you guys want to, whatever you believe, whatever you want to think about the church, but I was the one that was the gospel doctrine teacher, for years and years, that was such a scriptorian and so involved in it. I said, you have to believe me. I did not lose my mind. I opened my mind for the first time and looked at this critically. And, one of them piped up and she said, well, I can see that, but it all comes down to the Book of Mormon. There's no way that Joseph Smith could have written that himself. And I just said, why? Why couldn't he have?
Yeah.
Every other author on the planet wrote their book by themselves. Why couldn't he write that? Well, it's just too involved. It's too complicated. There's too much. And I said, no, not really.
Yeah.
So to think the same thing, because that's what we've been taught, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just, bottom line is I'm saying, hooray for you for having the courage to stand up for something, even though all of your peers and your family or whoever, your husband, might look at you and say, Renee's going cuckoo.
Yeah.
You just have to just go forward with what you believe.
Yeah.
Let everyone talk. Let them talk. Let them gossip. That's what I did. I just figured you guys needed something to talk about.
Yeah.
Well,
Something to talk about. Yeah.
okay.
No, but you know what? And there's a very great statement that they said, they're going to talk about you, whether they like you or don't like you. So let them talk and just do you.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right.
Thanksgiving.
That's right. People will say that about me when I write a book finally. And I'll say, yeah, I can't write a book, but I have AI.
Yeah.
That's right.
Joseph's AI he thought he was talking to God.
Yeah. Well, he had Sidney Rigdon and, other people with more skills.
There could be collaboration. We don't really know for sure, but the evidence points to something.
Well, and what frustrates me, and you probably get this too, Lila, Jean, what kind of feedback did you get? When you and Michelle, where did you get feedback, or did Michelle get feedback that Jean's tearing you away, or, what's Jean's destroying your family?
Only from my lovely mother-in-law.
Oh, Michelle's mother. I knew him. I never liked him in the first place.
No doubt. No doubt.
So anyhow, there was kind of that. We had a love-hate relationship with each other that allowed us to talk plainly all through our life together, right? And so we would have some banter, right, back and forth. But I had stopped going around 2015 because I thought, and it was actually before even the policy of discrimination. What do we call that?
Oh yeah, the
LGBTQ policy. Because I thought that the church could be better, right? Yeah. I thought that women should have the priesthood, and I thought that there should be a gentler treatment of gays. We had some gay men in our ward who had a relationship, but they were attending, they had callings, and they were apparently obeying they're together as roommates, but they're not engaging in any activity, right?
Yeah.
And so they were towing that party line. But I thought, it's too bad they can't enjoy more their company. And so I just thought that the leaders at the top were just not doing the job that they should be doing for Christ's church. And I thought, wait a minute, Christ started 2 churches that we know of as Mormons. In the Middle East, that lasted maybe 70 years before the Great Apostasy. And then in America, that maybe lasted between 180 and 200 years. And then, the whole downfall of the Nephites, happened shortly thereafter. Maybe Joseph isn't as good as Jesus even at starting churches.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe since it's been about 180, 200 years since the first vision and all these things, maybe the church just isn't true anymore as far as the leadership has gone astray. If that could possibly be true, then I'm not too excited about going to church. But John DeLynn actually kept me going in 2013 and 14 because it was like, hey, it's like a date. Sit next to your wife for an hour, hold her hand, sing songs together. Who would want to do that, right? And then when Kate Kelly got excommunicated, I stopped paying tithing. And then 6 months later, John DeLynn got excommunicated. And I said, I can't attend a church that is like a kid at a playground that says, if you don't do what I say, I'm taking my ball home.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like the downfall. And so But my wife said that's not enough information to not attend the true church still, right? So for 5 years, we had this situation happen. Finally, COVID summer allowed me to, the first thing that popped on my YouTube feed that, because I apparently had seen some of John Dehlin here and there, but I wasn't following him all the way. And I noticed that he took a turn that was a little bit edgier, but everybody's stories were just, oh, that's too bad that their experience, wasn't as good as my friend's experience. Even though I stopped going, I still thought maybe Joseph Smith was a prophet and maybe Jesus was,
Yeah.
But Bishop Sam Pinson's story, the excommunication of Bishop Sam Pinson.
That was a good one.
A jaw-dropping moment. It's the first time I had heard all the things that could be wrong with the theology or the church history, as well on top of that as people getting excommunicated for having a thought and expressing it in a post on Facebook, or like John Dehlin having a thought to invite people to share their thoughts, right? And then Kate Kelly having a thought to say, hey, leaders of the church, ask God if women should be ordained or not, right? Yeah. That was the whole thing. Just pray about it. They could have said, hey, thanks for bringing that to our attention. We prayed in the temple for 2 weeks, and God has told us it's just not the right time, right? They could have said that, and everybody would be like, oh, okay, you're doing their job. But instead, it's like, no, Kate, we're sorry, you have to be excommunicated. And that just just doesn't sit well. So at the end of COVID summer, I just been binging everything, right? And I was just floored with everything that I had heard.
You were done.
I said to my wife, she was Relief Society secretary, I say, you could stay going to church, you could stay paying tithing. I just have so much more information that I just need you to know what it is, or else I'm going to go crazy holding it inside. She had been laid off because of, COVID layoffs and stuff. And so she had time. So we watched Hans and Brigitte Mattson. Started off with Leah and Cody Young because they get excommunicated. Well, he does. They don't even care about her for starting a Facebook group to support people that are losing their faith, and as if they started a whole new church. And, the bishop's questions say you can't be a whole new church. In a week, she was like, yeah, I don't believe anymore. But she stayed secretary for a few more months until they had a lesson where everybody gushed about how great Joseph Smith was. And, almost like, I wish I could be the mother to his children, or, just adoration. I'm not saying that that's what happened.
No, I know what you're saying, though. I would have been one of his wives. Yeah.
If I could get sealed to Joseph Smith, that would be awesome, right?
Yeah.
And so she said she got physically ill because it was, a Zoom Relief Society meeting. And she just like, I can't do this anymore. So she said I can't be secretary anymore. But she kept doing the newsletter for another year.
There's my point. See, women are just going to keep serving.
So that's how. But anyway, so after a month went by, Michelle decides to tell her mother, and spills her guts over like a 2-hour period. And her mother says, wow, it sounds like we've been duped. And she went home, and the next day she came back and said to both of us, I think you're being influenced by Satan. And so I said, Anitra, I'm in the room.
Oh my gosh.
Don't talk to me in the third person, because I'm a Satan, that did it.
And I know that it's hypocritical, because my husband has accused me of that. He's saying, well, you're just repeating what Bill Reel and RFM say. And I said, no, I had these thoughts. They've been reinforced by what I've heard, but I had these thoughts initially as well. And he doesn't believe me. And I say the same thing. You guys are just minor birds. You're saying what you hear over the pulpit, oh, you've been influenced by Satan, or, oh, you just wanted to sin, because that's what they're told over the pulpit. And then they repeat those words.
Right.
So, I know on both sides there's bias, but to me, things like the SEC letter and the misuse of tithing money, and just the more historical people like Matt Harris and Benjamin Park, who do not say anything that's a personal opinion. Their information that they give out is strictly historical. And so when you can base something on literal history that has been data proved and verified, and then just sit back and go, I don't know, it's just the facts, ma'am. I don't know what to tell
That's
you.
right.
Then I think
Yeah.
you have a hard time going, oh, well.
Yeah.
That Satan's influence thing, I think, is big, because even though they don't realize it, that we have for so many dozens of years had one side of the story.
Yeah.
And then for just a few years had the other side of the story, to say, wow, just a few bits of research counteracts all the years that you've been in church.
Yeah.
I trust that you've looked at both sides of the issue now, right?
Right.
Instead, it's like, oh, Satan's influencing you. It's like, well, because you're conditioned to say that.
That's exactly right. And Lila, because I had the same thing, Jean, and I think it's very common as the steps go through. When I first started hearing things, it was like, well, I think there's a big problem, but Joseph Smith was still a prophet and the Book of Mormon is still true. And so, and everybody starts out that way. I mean, that's where Michelle Stone is, right? Well, polygamy is wrong, but Joseph Smith was a prophet and the Book of Mormon is true. Yeah. Every other prophet after that has been a mafia leader, but that's what everybody has. That's the last
thing to go.
That's the last thing to go, is when you start realizing that how brilliant some people are, other people that haven't had training, they don't have a master's degree or PhD in, contemporary writing, that they could also write a book without having any knowledge. You start finding those things out, or you start seeing historically what's in the Book of Mormon is impossible. Yeah. And, you've got people like Todd Christofferson, I think, that's still saying, hey, there's still time. I mean, you never know when you're going to run into a mummy somewhere. And it's kind of like, okay, yeah, they are doing more, exploring in Egypt, and they're finding more lost cities. They're not finding that in America. So, I mean, there's just so many little things like that. But I think the most important thing is just trying to be authentic and trying to get the word out with love. It's hard because I get real riled up sometimes. But I see, like I said, with this being a political thing right now, it's really also bringing even more division into, because not only now are we fighting over whether the church is true, now we're fighting over which political candidate is true and which one is being led by God and which one is being led by Satan. And it's like, and now with the Trump assassination attempt, he was saved by God. And now even Spencer Cox has changed his vote because he now says he was saved by God. And I'm like, oh, now I've lost all.
Well, here's the thing on that note.
Yeah.
If he was saved by God, what about the guy that died?
Oh, I said that to someone. He said, well, God has all his children in, and he has a personal plan. That's the real.
It's time to go. Is that what we believe with this family and everybody there at a Trump rally? It was his time to go, but not Trump's.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I honestly believe that.
I know. It's like saying, well, the one person who survived, the plane crash was chosen of God, and the rest of them, he didn't care about them. It was their time to go.
Yeah. And that even during Columbine. So when was Columbine? In the 90s. My mother actually said, because this was a story that was going around the church, that the seminary kids were saved because they were at seminary and hadn't gone to school yet. And so their lives were saved. And I remember, this is back in the 90s. And I remember going, wow, Mom. So all those other kids, God didn't care about. Only the little Mormon kids were the only ones that were saved. And that's still the mentality.
Such a terrible way to look at things.
Yeah.
And what about missionaries that die on their missions?
Right. And here's one thing we can hope probably that Spencer Cox will start following our podcast. It's Spencer Cox. Is that who you said?
Yeah.
Because the very same day Trump was saved, we didn't get assassinated either. Yeah. God was looking after us.
There you go. So that we could do another podcast.
So that we can do more podcasting. So Spencer, if you ever hear this, thank you for subscribing.
Yes.
So anyway, so let's go back to, you had sort of, they'll say, lost your testimony, but the real thing is you discovered more truth. So that you
Right.
can, it was a truth challenge that the church had, not necessarily a testimony challenge for you.
Yeah.
And you, did you start a podcast before joining Bill's?
You know, it's so funny. I had a podcast because this is so my personality. I decided I really wanted to get healthy, and I really wanted to start eating a plant-based diet. So I heard about this training group that I could go to that were vegan authorities, that they would teach you how to be a plant-based eater. So I'm like, yes, I'm going to jump in both feet, you know? So I fly to New York. I go to this lady's apartment, and she's got people there that have flown in from Australia, from Denver, from all over the world in her tiny little apartment in Harlem, New York, because she is a vegan expert. And she's teaching us all how important it is to be vegan. And even then I had my cognitive dissonance, right? I'm sitting there going, well, but, you know, because like this one doctor came and he said, you know, if you're a true vegan, you have to take a B12 supplement. If you literally will lose your mind, your brain needs B12. And the only way you're going to get it is from an animal product. So he said, you have to take a B12 supplement. So I'm like, what if we only ate meat like once a week? Or, you know, he's like, everybody's like, you know, and then, and at a time I'm sitting there, I have my leather purse. I had a little pin on that had leather and sterling silver. And I'm just kind of like, I was just going to eat plant-based. I didn't realize it went this far. Then they took us to a store that only sold plant-based things, like plant-based shoes and plant-based purses. And I'm like,
oh yeah, that's
I'm
extra.
like, it's called plastic, and that's a petroleum product, and that's not really good for the environment. And they're like, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's all about the animals. And I'm like, okay, anyway, but I got into
So you wanted to start a podcast
So I started a podcast.
Veganish.
No, I started a podcast, and it was with a couple of ladies that had written a book on how to go plant-based. And so I thought, I'm not even going to worry about the animal issues. I just want to talk about eating plant-based. It was called Get Wasted. And a doctor had come up with it, and I thought, what a great name. So I started a podcast called Get Wasted. And I did that for a while. And then I did, and then
so
when
plant-based diet included marijuana then?
Well, that's, you know, yeah.
You know, wasted. You know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I would have people say that. And then when I finally, you know, my brain said, this is ridiculous. I am so bloated. I haven't lost any weight. I don't feel good. This isn't working for me. And, you know, so I got out of that craziness. Then when I went gray, I started a podcast called Go Gray Dame. And I did that for a while. And then, you know, you kind of lose your life changes and things happen. So then I started She Became Visible. And I started out with interviewing women who, two things, either had gone gray or they had a child with disabilities. And I talked to a lot of women that had children with disabilities and as caregivers, Lila, and what their lives were like. And COVID for women that had children with disabilities was 3 times the hell that the rest of the mothers, because a lot of their you know, school services were ended, disability programs were ended, and women had kids with autism who change doesn't work well for them. And all of a sudden they're not going to the school with their friends, and they're really frustrated and they're angry. And it was hell for these women. I interviewed one of my favorite guests was, she was also on Mormon Stories, was Katie Harmon. And she had a son that had a diaphragmatic hernia like my son had. And Katie just lost her son last year, and just a year after we lost our son. And I actually asked her, Lila, to be on the show, and she said, I can't, I'm not ready yet. She was on my show when Max was still alive, but now since his death, she's still processing that grief. But so that was the focus of my other one. So that I'm trying to kind of incorporate that into She Became Visible, is just women in general, how to live their best life in whatever situation you're in, whether you're still caregiving or whether you have a husband that's very dominant and you're not giving you the freedom to be who you are and you're just going along with it because that's, what Mormon women do. They go along to get along. And so I don't know, but it's one of those things, like I said, with Dr. Julie Hanks, I got into a group and I thought, well, I need to learn more. I want to really try to not be black and white. I want to really learn how to do gray, right? In all areas, not my hair, but also life. There are shades of gray. So I want to learn that and be better at it. But I couldn't, because this group of women, it's like, look, if you need therapy to stay in a religion, girlfriend, there's a problem. If you need therapy to be able to live your authentic life, if that's what's keeping you in a depressive state on medication because you can't be who you are, then be who you are and stop taking the medication. It blew my mind. So I don't know. That's kind of where we're at. And Lila is just as outspoken and loud as I am. And she's a rare find. So I was really glad to get to know her and find a sister soul.
Yeah. How long ago did you start She Became Visible? And then how many episodes had you done before you joined Bill Reel's Mormon Discussion?
I had done about 70 before I joined Bill. And like I said, I love how good Bill and John DeLynn are about this is episode 735, and like I said, my poor person that does my editing for me, she's like, what episode is this? I'm like, I don't know. 74. I need a Maven. I need Julia. I need someone that does that for me. I'm too chatty. That's not my thing.
I went to public school. I can't count that high, so I don't number mine.
Okay, Jean, let me tell you something. I told this to my husband. Over at the gym I go to here, a couple of the machines, instead of having the weight, if you're going to do a certain amount of weight, they have two different cables that are coming into one cable. So they will say, this cable has 17 and a half pounds. This cable has 17 and a half pounds. I have to get my calculator out to figure out what the weight is. Like, don't do that to me. Just say this is 25 pounds or this is 35 pounds. I don't want to do math.
Yeah.
That's not my thing.
Well, they're a gym that includes well-rounded exercising. You have to exercise your brain as well as your body.
There you go. Yeah.
It's like doing puzzles in our old age, right?
So what episode are you on?
Your mind sharp.
What's Later Day Justice? What are you on?
We are closing in on 80.
Excellent.
Closing in.
Not too bad.
But you're doing twice a week?
Ish.
That's
They're
crazy.
shorter. They're shorter.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So,
that's true. And women like to talk, so we can't do that.
So you brought in Lila in February. Mm-hmm. Lila, how much did she have to pay you in order to join?
Thousands.
I demand a very high salary.
That's right.
Actually, it's just enjoyable just doing what we're doing. I don't need to be paid. It's fun.
Oh yeah. So when did you guys become friends?
We met at Thrive, right?
Yeah, Thrive. Probably.
I think we met at Thrive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that like 3 years ago? Thrive Salt Lake.
I'm trying to remember which
Palace.
I feel like it was a St. George Thrive.
I feel like too. Yeah.
But here's the thing. I was just thinking about listening. All three of us, I feel like we're contemporaries as far as leaving or deconstructing fully.
Yeah.
Like I think we all had levels, of deconstruction along the way. They call that a shelf, but where you kind of have your like, wait a minute, this doesn't work. So you put it up there and you're like,
yep,
I'm going to talk to Heavenly Father about that someday, that kind of thing. But as far as like stopping going or just being done, I feel like my last time I went to church as an active member was probably right around January of 2019. So that was prior to COVID, and you guys were right around there, right?
Yeah.
2020, something like
that. Yeah, I had stopped going earlier, but
that's right. That's right.
Interestingly, around the turn of the century, I was board executive secretary.
Okay.
And then I was in the elders quorum presidency, and then young men's, and then a couple other callings, and then
your hand is going lower.
Primary, but not what's the first primary thing?
Nursery.
So I was a nursery leader,
The first part.
And then
You work your way up.
Janitor. So it was like a meteoric fall instead of a meteoric rise.
Yeah.
They're like, Gene.
Around the time I was in the Elders Quorum presidency, I started wearing shirts like this, and they were
Yeah,
he doesn't have it anymore.
Yeah. He's gone.
Well, you know,
I wanted to tell people, don't invite me into a blessing, right?
You know what?
I'm wearing the uniform.
Lila, I told this to Gene the other day. I saw a whole thing, this really handsome guy. And Gene, you would look the exact same. He started saying how if you want to put some color into your suits, start wearing a Hawaiian shirt. And so he would model this really great tailored suit with that Hawaiian shirt would look fabulous. That. And then he would put like a little pocket square, and just that little bit of collar coming out. Yeah, would pop out. And it's like, I might be a Hawaiian shirt.
Go for that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if the church wants to become more of a worldwide church and have a broad appeal, they need to get out of the white shirt and tie thing, because that not only is it an expense for people who live in Africa, that they can't afford, let them wear their shirt that they already have. Because this is ridiculous. And telling women you have to wear your nicest dress or whatever, it becomes a fashion show at church. It does. And I was in it. I was in a fashion show. I remember thinking, I got to dress up more. I got to go get me some new shoes. I need some new dresses.
Yeah.
Old stuff that I have had for 10 years. And these girls are coming in looking fine. And I got to up my game. Is that really what it's upsetting. Yeah. Especially for the people who come in and they may not have the money. Anyway, these are the things that I'm like, little things along the way. You know, Rene, you were saying there were these little things that happened where you were like, that wasn't cool. Yeah. You just said no to me when I asked for a priesthood holder to come sit with my son. Yeah. That's a no way. No, not happening. Yeah. So unfair. Little things like that. I remember thinking, sitting down on the pew with all of my kids, 7 of them, at different stages of life where they're teasing each other, pinching each other, gouging, elbowing, doing annoying things. And I'm like, this is so hard for me. I am not enjoying this. And there's my husband up on the stand. Yeah. Just looking down at us and giving us the eye. You're making me look bad. Yes. Yes. And I'm like, you try doing this. Yeah. But no, they don't ever. That doesn't work. It doesn't happen unless you're the organist. But even they just come up out of the crowd and sit. It's not like, anyway, it just seems so unfair. And I remember complaining one time to my older sister who said, why can't you just be a supportive, wife to your priesthood holder husband? Why do you have to make a fuss about it? Yeah. And I was like, she's got 8 kids. She seems fine about, my sister, she seems fine with it. What is my problem? But then I started thinking, you know what? It's because she just shuts up. That's right. She just puts up with it, and we all just put up with it. Yeah. But is it okay? And is it right? No, it's not. Yeah. Nor should we have to sit there for an hour with our kids. I mean, why? I guess, anyway. No, it really is the indoctrination and the guilt and the shame. And my husband and I last night went to a screening from a Sundance movie called Sugarcane. And it's a true story of the Indigenous kids that were sent to a Catholic school in Canada. And the number of bodies that were found, the number of dead babies that were found in the incinerator. And these poor women that said, we were taught shame and fear, and we believed it. So we felt guilty. We felt like it was our fault. And, this young man, this older man said, I would go into confessional. We were, it was demanded that we go to confession once a week and sit there and confess my sins to the priest that was abusing me. And it's exactly what's going on in this church now. It's like you people are hypocrites, and yet we sit and we listen and we forgive them. We say men are only fallible. And I'm like, well, fallible men don't start 13 shell companies for 22 years. Those are knowingly things, and so the forgiveness.
A flawed man like myself doesn't put the lawnmower away after he
Exactly.
on.
Yes.
Not cheat and lie to the
Yeah.
SEC and
Yeah, there's
well, I've accumulated billions of dollars, but
yeah. That's what I tell my husband all the time. I said, honey, a fallible man, forgets, like you say, to put gas in the car, or tells his wife, she looks great in those jeans when actually she doesn't. And that's a fallible man. You have never started a shell company. You fight with our tax attorney, making sure that everything is legal and upright. And he doesn't even ask him, what can I do to get some more tax benefits? He would not even ask that.
Yeah.
He just says, how much taxes do I owe? And that's the difference. So those are the people that,
You're making me feel like I'm falling short of being a good, flawed man.
Because you have a lot of tax write-offs.
that 17 million Mormons can worship, even though only 4 million Mormons go to church. But anyway,
let me tell you something. I got some statistics for you. Just because I thought this was, I was looking up baby boomers and why baby boomers won't change, and somehow I got into the religion affiliations in Latin America. And this is a statistic that was done in 2020. 57.1% are Catholic. 0.4% are Mormon. There's evangelical, Pentecostal, Jehovah's Witness, Adventists are higher than the Mormon church in the Latin American countries. So this whole, thing about the church is a rolling stone and the whole bit,
Philosophy has a rose.
Yeah. And, one of the reasons that boomers will leave the church is because of failed church experiences. And I think that's where the women are, a lot of people are going, this is not the church experience. And you guys, same thing. I grew up with road shows and dance festivals, and youth conference was in Indiana. It wasn't at my local church. We would drive all the way to Indiana to stay in a college dorm. It was so exciting and so much fun. And, people, and then, or their children, baby boomers will leave the church if their children leave the church. I found that. And the women that I run into at Thrive and at Sunstone, the women that have left the church, it's because their husbands have also left the church. And very few.
Or they have a gay kid.
Or they have a gay child. Yeah. And And I know there are some women that have left the church, but, and their husbands are usually, they'll say, well, I have to get a divorce because I need an eternal companion. And, fortunately, my husband doesn't think that way. It's an interesting thing, but Lila and I are fighting for the boomer ladies to stand up and say, I love you. I want to be married to you. I think we have the same values. I don't believe in this religion, and I'm going to go my own direction. I'm going to take a yoga class, by the way, and I probably might get a tattoo. I don't know why I say that. You
could almost subtitle your show, She Became Visible Fighting for the Boomer Ladies Out There.
There you go. Maybe if we put boomer in the title, there you go.
Boomer girls gone wild.
We could start an OnlyFans account, Lila. Yeah. Start monetizing this thing here,
Yeah. So anyway, we now know Rene a little bit more. We know Lila a little bit more. And I encourage you to go see.
Yeah, we know
Rene
Gina
and
a little bit
Lila
more. Gina Michelle
on their show.
We'll have to have Michelle on the show, Malila.
Yeah, we'll have Michelle. Links in the description. Yeah, Michelle's like, no way ever.
Yeah.
You would have to get her pretty drunk.
Yeah. Well,
boomer girls can do it. Can do hard things.
Yeah.
Get her.
Because we have.
So.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, we'll provide links in the description to your show.
You're the best.
And also, Lila, when was your episode with Ed Mormon Stories to get a more full of your story?
That was in.
That during COVID?
Right before COVID.
Wow.
Like February 2020.
It may have caused the spread of COVID. When it went viral.
COVID. It was, the spread.
Throngs of people would meet with each other in small homes to watch your show.
Yeah.
And that spread COVID faster.
I knew it. I knew she was a disruptor. You know what's funny, Jean? Her father set my husband apart as a missionary in the mission home.
Isn't that weird?
Isn't that weird?
That is
Yeah.
weird. I probably will say, and Michelle's not here to say for sure, but I am pretty sure that one of your episodes is one of the shows that I showed Michelle as well. Your own story was part of it.
There needs to be more women's voices before the women. There are so many male voices out there that keep the women quiet. Even on the ex-Mormon, there's a lot of men's voices out there, and so that's another thing that Lila and I are doing, is trying to give women an opportunity. I had a wonderful woman reach out to me that's good friends with one of the apostles' wives, and she acknowledges everything that we said, but she said, I would never go on and say anything. And I don't blame her, or I have even my daughters, they have people in the ward that are weird. And
too bad you couldn't say, hey, let's record a show and just write on it, do not open until 2050.
There you go. I can't wait. I wish I could live long enough to see 30, 40 years from now, because it's going to be
this is an exciting time.
Yeah.
This is all the time in Mormon church history or any other sort of thing. There's the spread of information has been very slow.
Yeah.
This is the first time a major religion has been challenged because of its history that we can have evidence of and do it online with billions of people having access to information.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just the information age is just amazing. And so.
Well, and I want to tell the women too, I want you to think back on times when you stood up for your kids. Times when you went into a school for a counseling session and you told the teacher, you don't know my child, you're wrong. Or times when I had to stand up to a doctor or say, you don't understand, I know my son's in pain, you're not paying attention. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'll be darned, you're right, he has pancreatitis, And those are the moments you need to reflect on and go, look, I was strong enough to stand up for my children. I was strong enough to defend them at the doctor, at the school, at football practice. You need to stand up for yourself with that same strength now and say, you're wrong,
Yeah. Use that fire that's in there driving you crazy that you're taking meds for.
Right.
Just use that, speak out, because there is, like Jean was saying, with social media now, the power of united voices has become so huge, it's unstoppable.
Yeah.
And people, it used to be we had to just suffer in silence. Not anymore.
Right.
That voice empowers so many others to say, okay, if all these people are doing it, I can do it too.
Exactly.
That's right.
Be damned to all of it. So what if they threaten me? So what if they come over and say, the bishop shows up on your doorstep? Whatever. You can stand in front of them and tell them this is your home and to leave.
Yeah.
You don't have to do what they say. I'm always amazed at these people who are on the brink or have left, and they freak out because their bishop calls them for an interview. And I'm thinking, you don't have to go in.
Yeah.
Why are you scared and cowering at home thinking, oh no, he asked me to come in for an interview. What's he going to say? What's he going to do?
Yeah.
You don't even have to go. And if you do go in with some attitude and tell him where to put it.
Yeah.
That's right. I've said this on other podcasts, but I'll say it one more time. I became friends with Maven Brodie, and she was so brave 2.5 years ago. She chose to vote opposed.
Yes.
And her courage inspired me to do the same thing. So she voted opposed in her own state conference, and I did the same thing in my state conference. And she talked about how nervous she was, going to the stake president afterwards, and stuff like that. And I would have been almost as nervous. But luckily for me, the stake president said, hey, let's go in here to the scout room. So he wasn't in the stake president's office where he was behind the big desk or anything like that.
It was a little more.
And I basically told him, because when I voted opposed, I made sure everybody saw that I also voted in favor of all the local leaders. I sat in the third row.
The big
stake conference at the Oakland Interstate Center in the big auditorium. And I say to people, I didn't maybe change anybody's lives that day, or anything, but 500 people saw somebody thinking for themselves for the first time.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so luckily I told the stake president that, I don't think I think the church could be better in its relations with, LGBTQ. I think it can be better in all these other areas. And he said, well, yeah, I'm a lawyer in California, and I instruct companies on how to work within the LGBTQ laws that exist. So I agree with you, but I'm waiting for, the Lord to share with the brethren.
Yeah, it's not about the Lord.
How to change. There's a true order of things. And so anyhow, yes, Maven's bravery helped me, do that. And I'll always appreciate that. And so thanks for coming on our show. Hope everyone enjoys the content, can like and subscribe and do all those things. Visit Renee's show. She Became Visible. I never said that Renee's last name was Steelman. So I'm going to put it on record that she does have a last name.
I do. Yes. I tried to hyphenating it for a while when I was in a brief feminist moment. And then I decided there was too many boxes to fill in. So I just had to drop the hyphenated name. But Jean, thank you as well for reaching out. And this is the second time I've been on your show, and your efforts to promote other people and to lift others up should be applauded. And I'm so grateful for you taking your show to that area where your whole goal is to lift others. And I thank you so much for that.
And it is to honor anybody. So if anybody has a faithful podcast, even, I'm impressed with anybody who has a thought and that expresses it. I'm all in favor of it. And so the door is open for either side of the aisle. It's, there's some dogma that comes out maybe, but everybody's life's experience is their experience, right? And so that can be displayed on our show. And so, all righty.
All right.
We did it.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good rest of the week, we'll say.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.